What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Mr.Ulee back with another NBA video. Today's video is about why I think that Michael Jordan is probably the most overrated scorer of all time. Make sure y'all leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get right into the video.
Ay, I walk around like that nigga, finger on the trigger. If a nigga wants some smoke, I let that chopper eat his liver.
Michael Jordan is definitely a top 3 player of all time, and to many, he's the greatest to ever touch a basketball. He dominated on both ends of the floor, and it's shown in his accolades as he's one of the 2 only players to receive an MVP and a Defensive Player of the Year in the same season. Being overrated doesn't mean you're a bad player, it just means that your fans or the people who try to argue for you are putting you in a higher regard than you should be, and I feel like it's my job to expose that. Obviously, MJ is a phenomenal scorer, with averages of 30 points per game on nearly 50% from the field, while holding the record for 10 scoring titles and having a total of over 32,000 points. 32K, alright, in just 15 seasons. However, when you look into MJ's atrocious 3-point shooting and what 90s basketball was like, you can see why these stats are great but misleading. To start off, Michael Jordan only averages 32.7% from 3, and the agreed upon average 3-point percentage is about 36%. So off the bat, MJ is already below average, but when you ask MJ fans if Jordan was a good 3-point shooter, they will tell you that he was, and that he was especially good as he got older. And if you even look deeper into Jordan's 3-point percentage, you can see that he only averaged 30% from behind the arc, and that he shot below 20% 4 times and below 30% 6 times from 1984 to 1993. But when the line was moved closer to the basket in the 1994 season, he shot 40% from 3. When the line went back to the original length, however, MJ regressed back to shooting 24% from behind the arc. Many Michael Jordan supporters will argue that since MJ scored without a jump shot in an era with the toughest defense, that makes his case for being a great scorer even better. This is simply not true. 90s basketball was in fact the easiest era for isolation players like Michael Jordan to score. With illegal defense rules that prevented zone defense, teams either had to let Jordan play man-to-man or hard double team him, which leaves someone open. The Bulls, especially before Jordan had great teammates like Pippen and Rodman, would take full advantage of this and just have Jordan stand on one side of the court while the rest of the team was on the other side to let him score. This is shown when you look at the pace of 90s basketball. Teams had less possessions per game because players were taking longer to shoot the ball. A pace that is too slow or too fast can lead to inflated or misleading stats. Pace is why players like Wilt Chamberlain and Oscar Robertson could average 50 points per game or a triple-double. As a result of heavy isolation play, the pace slowed and it made it look like scoring was hard when in fact it was actually easier than it has been since. This is why, in my opinion, the early 2000s are the purest era of basketball. Zone defense was allowed and so was hand checking, but players like Kobe, LeBron, and Dirk could still dominate, and they deserve more credit for that. The pace was solid too because 3-point shooting was starting to come into his own. Could Michael Jordan still be a great scorer in that era? Yes. Would he average 37 points? No. Hell no. And in the 2010s, he would be able to average solid numbers because I see him as a higher IQ Westbrook. MJ averages would probably be around 26 points per game, 6 assists and 5 rebounds, around 2 steals, and half a block on 45% from the field and 25% from 3. In an era where shooting is important and zone defense is allowed, scoring in the paint or mid-range is more difficult for a player like MJ. Teams build defensive schemes around exploiting this. Just look at Ben Simmons for example. You can make the case that half of the time he's hurting his team by not being able to shoot, but MJ can shoot, even though it's below average. So I think teams wouldn't give him as much space as they do to a player like Simmons, but they would still sag quite a bit.
But there was hand checking in the 90s. MJ would easily destroy this era, and the players today couldn't handle the physicality.
Okay, sure, the physicality. When people say this, it's obvious that they're referring to the Bad Boy Pistons. Sure, the Bad Boy Pistons were rough, but they were actually being too rough. In the 90 to 91 season, the NBA implemented the flagrant foul rule. That means that MJ actually played a majority of his career without the so-called physicality that no modern player could handle. I know people like to look back and wonder at the times of the Bad Boy Pistons, but I don't know if this is just me, but I would prefer being able to play basketball without the threat of being punched in the face. People also bring up hand checking, and hand checking wasn't removed until later though. People act like hand checking is such a good tactic when in reality it isn't. I actually play basketball and I've been hand checked by older, taller, and stronger players, and I can tell you from experience it doesn't really do much. And if hand checking was really also great, does that mean that compared to modern defenders, Michael Jordan or Scottie Pippen are overrated because they were able to use hand checking? No. Hell no. They're great defenders who just used hand checking to help them. There was still skill to defense, and hand checking couldn't turn a bad defender into a good one. So I don't see why people bring it up to say that Jordan scored while being hand checked. But yeah guys, this is it for the video. I honestly do understand what MJ has done is amazing for a scorer. Being overrated doesn't mean that you're bad, it just simply means that your fans portray you to be so far above all other players in scoring, when in reality, that might not be true. If you stick any isolation player like Kobe or Kyrie Irving in the 90s, they would thrive. Anyways, remember to subscribe to join the #SupremeDrip gang. Share with some friends, and I'm out. Peace.